I'm Isabella,
I know.
And I'm Beck. Hello.
and it's nice to meet you. Nice to have you here with us.
Yes, it's so
Yeah,
nice to
of
meet you. Thank you
course.
for being here.
Yeah, of course. It's nice to meet both of you. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, and we're going to be chatting about sapphic representation in media and how it affects us and our experiences with it. Without further ado, do you want to let us know about your sexuality, identity, if you're comfortable?
Yeah, of course. Um, I'm pretty unlabeled. I just generally go by queer. Um, I'm non-binary, so that's a big part of how I see my gender expression. Sometimes I go by bi, but sometimes I feel like it's not as inclusive as a label as I'd like. So I just would generally go by queer.
Well,
Yep.
nice.
Mhm.
So, let's start with the general question. What is your experience with representation and how you grew up?
Mhm. So, I grew up in a very like strongly Christian household, so I was not really exposed to any sort of queer representation in the media, especially not between like two non-men. If it was anything, it would usually be between men. Um, so I didn't really have much to go off of in my youth. But I remember the first time I had an experience with like queer representation was just hearing about Brokeback Mountain, which I feel like is a very like stereotypical one. But I just remember like hearing about it and that was like my first introduction. But I remember the one that really sticks with me is I think I was about 12 and it was like the series finale of Adventure Time when Princess Bubblegum and Marceline kiss and it like confirmed the relationship after like all that time. I think I was like probably around 12 then, like I said. But I just remember like being like so in shock, like my jaw dropped and I like scrambled to get the remote to like rewind on the cable to like be like, did that really just happen? Um, but yeah, I think that like those two being my first like real concrete examples that I have of queer representation in my youth were pretty important to how I would like come to understand it. I think with like Brokeback Mountain being my first introduction to that, I think it really kind of illuminated how queerness can be used in media as kind of like a cautionary tale, especially with like the like bury your gays trope, right? Where it's like that
Yeah.
was my first real introduction to that. And seeing that representation in kind of a way where it was like this is something that elicits some sort of like narrative punishment, but then I think in stark contrast, seeing the Adventure Time episode with Bubblegum and Marceline was very different to that because it really showed characters that were supported within the narrative and their queerness was something to be like celebrated and admired at that like big moment at the end. It didn't really feel like um it was something to like just throw in there. It seemed like a big moment. And I think that was really important to me to kind of shifting my own ideas of how I saw queerness, not just in the culture, but within myself as well. And then probably the biggest thing I'd say, there was this game called Butterfly Soup, and it's like a visual novel type game. And that representation through that game was probably the biggest factor that led to my understanding of my queer identity, just because of the ways that they showed how queerness isn't something to just be like normalized, but it's also something full of joy and to be celebrated and to just be explored in all of its complexities rather than just like a simple means to tell a story. Um, so I'd say that those are pretty much the fundamental parts of my experience growing up. And I would say I was pretty lucky that I had in the representations I did see, especially with like the game and stuff like that, they were generally positive and pretty nuanced. Um, which I think was important when I started seeing more things that uh really started talking about like fetishization of sapphic couples and things like that, that I had that underlying of like no, like this, there is ways to portray this type of intimate connection between people in a way that shows the nuance of intimacy and human connection and the queer experience. Oh, mm.
It's amazingly well
Well,
put.
yeah, oh my
Thank you.
gosh. I feel like you should be leading this conversation. But I have a question. So I've never heard of butterfly soup.
Hmm.
Okay, can you like tell like those of us who don't know what that is, like a little
Yeah.
bit more about like what that game looked like and like why that was so significant?
Yeah, of course. So, it was a pretty like simple game. It's just a visual novel, so there's not very much like gameplay really. It's more of just like a creative way of telling a story. Um, but I think that came out around 2017. I would have played it a little later, but it follows two teenage baseball players in America. One is a non-binary lesbian and the other is like a demisexual lesbian. And it was just such a great way of representing that like journey of figuring out who you are and experiencing pushback from the culture around you. I know one of the main characters, their parents were pretty against their queerness and their discovery in that, especially with their gender nonconformity. So that was also another really powerful message in that, how even when there can be challenges and tension in the life around you, that when you have your people and you have people that support you in your identity and who you are, that you can be uplifted in these things that sometimes have been used to bring you down. And I felt like that was really powerful for me. It was also just such like a cute and like sweet portrayal of that like teenage like first crush, like friends to lovers type relationship. And it was just amazing. And I remember I was obsessed with it for like a year. And that really was like, okay, yeah, this is who I am. Like no denying after this. So
That's really beautiful. I've actually watched a playthrough of that game all the way back when I was like 12 or so,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's just like I feel you.
yeah.
And I think it's a very important thing to have stories that focus on the more down to earth
Yeah.
aspects of
Mhm.
sapphic relationships and queer people. And the fact that that game also had such a strong intersectionality between like Asian American backgrounds
Yes.
and
Yeah.
sexuality and gender, I thought that was very interesting because so much in media, if we do see representation of queer, like sapphic couples, they're oftentimes both white. We don't often see interracial couples. We don't
Hmm.
see couples that are from people who are Asian or Black or Mexican. Really, we don't see a lot of variety. And so I
Hmm.
think it's especially important that like a game like that was able to speak to for you like in such a personal way because it
Yeah.
makes it clear that there's not just one type of people like in that group that you find yourself in. Like there's a bunch of other people that all encompass that beautiful community.
Hmm. For sure. I think that intersectionality is such a big part of true representation because I think when you ignore that the nuance of human identity, you lose kind of the magic of narrations that are supposed to encapsulate what it means to be a human, right? I think there's so many complex and completely individual ways of experiencing pretty much anything in life. So I think the more nuanced and layered and ways we can examine how little facets of identity play off of each other and create larger perceptions of who we are, it just creates even more complex and like in-depth stories that really highlight, I guess, just the power and magic of being a human, which is what art tries to show. So
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, couldn't
I
have said
think a
it
lot of
better.
portrayals like are very like I mean I guess this is kind of what you're saying, but like they're very like one-sided, like one-dimensional.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of the time, like when there's like this narrative of like a family member or parents who like don't accept their child, then like
Mhm.
that's the storyline.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or like if like somebody is like coming to terms with coming out and like dealing with that, like that's the storyline. It's not
Hmm.
like it doesn't show like the highs and lows. And I feel like a lot of the time it's like in like writers are just like, oh, we're giving you a hard pill to swallow. We're putting in like a queer person. So why would we
Hmm.
give any other
Hmm.
pills for you to swallow? Like why would we like make them like non-binary or
Yeah.
demisexual, like oh like we have to make this as palatable as possible, but then you're reinforcing like stereotypes for straight people and then queer people aren't connecting to it, and so what is it doing? Like it's not
Hmm.
doing anything positive. So
Hmm.
I feel like um I'm actually shocked we had like one more interview before this, and I like just thought of this and I was like, wait, nobody's been talking about this, but I feel like we should talk about the L word because
Hmm.
I feel like that's like a lot of people, especially like our generation, the generation before us, like that was like the touchstone for like sapphic media representation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about like one-dimensional representation and very like white, very like um yeah, like stereotypical like
Hmm.
ideas about like what it is to be a lesbian, and what it is to be a queer woman. And like the one bisexual character is like
Whoa.
Alice is like she's shamed. She's like constantly everyone's making a joke out of her sexuality, and it's like okay, like why are you friends with them? But yeah, I think that that's like unfortunately still for a lot of people like one of the most mainstream touchstones for like sapphic representation, and it's still so flawed. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that ties back perfectly into like how Beck you started with mentioning Adventure Time, and it's like there's an entire discourse in that fandom about, oh, well, they're both lesbians, even though Marceline is very explicitly portrayed as a bisexual character.
Hmm.
And so there's no nuance there. They're both in a
Yeah.
sapphic relationship. That doesn't work. They're both lesbians. And
Hmm.
so you erase bisexuality, and that's harmful. Not to mention, a lot of people just don't want to deal with the fact that their relationship isn't super duper healthy from the get-go. And
Hmm.
that's another thing. Like, there's a lot of difficulty in being able to see complicated relationships of sapphic characters being portrayed in a way that isn't just them being punished constantly.
Yeah.
And so whenever anybody tries to make a complicated and nuanced relationship that is given the same respect as heterosexual relationships are, they're oftentimes punished by not just uh, the target audience, the general audience, but also
Hmm.
members of the queer community themselves that
Hmm.
interpret that as toxic, even though sometimes it's good to be treated as equal, to be
Yeah.
given the same respect as straight stories are
Hmm.
given, and how complex they can be.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think oftentimes queer stories can be reduced, like what's been said, to kind of fit into like a palatable result for an audience. But I think we're all human beings. We all have equal capacities to be bad and toxic and layered and complex and have so many different facets that play into a relationship. It's not as simple as just narrowing it down to like, hey, this is just their one way that their relationship exists. The complexities of interpersonal connections and individuals does not allow for that. So I think that when we give queer stories the chance to like breathe and have ups and downs and have like an actual sense of like complexity to their connection rather than just like, ah, yeah, we just threw them together and now they're together. Um, I think that's really when we see like that equal portrayal that is given to heterosexual couples as well, like you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. And I wonder like if I think a lot of the times, like as queer viewers, we can be very critical of like queer representation and be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like this is like reinforcing this, or if like there's this idea of like what is like the perfect like representation.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think we have that higher standard because a lot of the time representation has just been so horribly flawed, or if it's
Mm-hmm.
there at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but at the same time, like it's impossible to create a character and a storyline that is like universal. And that's we don't expect that from straight characters and from
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like we don't expect that from the norm. We expect that from like any deviation from the norm. And
Hmm.
so I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I guess like kind of going off that, like, counterintuitive to that entire point. But one of our questions is like, what is like an ideal representation for you? Like what when
Hmm.
you're consuming a piece of media, like what makes you resonate with like the representation of queerness that it
Hmm.
like presents?
Yeah. Um, I actually do think that is pretty pertinent to what we were just talking about. Because I think really for me, like I don't I really just resonate with stories. I love writing. I'm an author. I'm writing my own novel right now that really have like complexities to the narrative, right? Like I don't want just a character. Like if you're gonna be evil, like why are you going to be evil? Like give me all the reasons and the backstory and the layers and how that fits into your connections with these people and this person and this. And like I think that for me, when I have a queer like story that I really relate to, it has all of those layers to it. It's not just like, oh yeah, so my parents don't accept me. It's like, here's the things that make this relationship strained beyond just that, that those then reinforce and play into. And here's all the ways that my identity conflicts with your identity and all of these things. So I think that for me, it's not necessarily a certain thing that is or isn't there. It's just a an intentional desire to make the story have that level of like complexity rather than just trying to take it to a simple place. I feel like when the people that are involved, whether it's an author, whether it's like a director or the actors or writers, right? I think if they just have the understanding that like this is supposed to have so many ways of looking at it and perspectives and versions of understanding it, then that's really what resonates with me, right? Like I'm like, if you're gonna like give me an evil lesbian woman, like don't just make her evil because she's gay. Like make her like evil because like I don't know, she had some backstory that like really messed her up, you know? Like I don't want it just to be this like simple thing. And that's why a lot of times even certain queer stories won't resonate with me because I just feel like they're too like, well, she's a lesbian, that's what we got. Like
Yeah.
that's her, you know, like and it's she doesn't feel like a person that I could see or that I could like see in front of me and be like, wow, like I actually understand you, you know?
No, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. It's like I feel like in order to be given representation, it's not just about showcasing characters that belong to different identities that aren't
Hmm.
seen. It's
Hmm.
also about representing the realness of these identities as just aspects of a person.
Yeah.
If you are a lesbian, that is not your whole personality. I
Hmm.
mean, what are you, an academic? Are you an athlete? Do you have trouble with relationships? Are you a
Hmm.
very like socially collected person? Like
Hmm.
what about you exists like parallel to your identity? Because it's not that your identity doesn't impact all those levels of your life, but if a character is only that identity, that shows that the representation is more so for giving brownie points, for
Yeah.
showing, oh, wow, look, we have a gay character, we have a lesbian character,
Hmm.
clap and give us money, as opposed to actively putting the effort and giving that character the same amount of attention and respect that you give your straight characters. And that itself reads to the audience. If you can tell a character is being treated as a complex character who also has this like this gender identity or this sexuality, and that's okay if it complements their characterization, but it should not be all there is. And I think I really agree with a lot of the points you were making.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, do you think that there's like certain forms of media that like allow for that complexity to like exist more? Like, I don't know, I guess you were talking about writing and
Hmm.
how like as somebody who is a writer and like likes to explore that like
Hmm.
complexity through writing, like do you feel like that's an avenue that you typically resonate more with? I don't know.
Um, I think I think like I created a whole list. I was like, here's things that I would recommend like if I when I get on here. Most of them are books because I really do resonate a lot with like the written word just because that's like a mode through which I think through a lot. But I also think that like obviously like film and TV and that has a very powerful way of displaying these complexities because it makes you feel so connected. You're seeing this character in front of your face, you know? Like it's not just something that you're conjuring in your mind. There's like a tangible thing happening in front of you. So I think some of the strongest like connections that I've had to queer stories in general, or even just like characters, right, was through kind of that visual means because it's like you're no longer just a part of my mind, you're like a tangible thing that I can understand. Um, but I also think music does have a very strong way of doing this just because it's so emotion filled, right? And you can create so many um different like illusions and metaphors and things that like take a little more uh detailed of an analysis to dig through. But I do think that there's more than just like a really long written thing to understand someone. I also think that like you can garner the same amount of complexity from things that maybe don't go into like such a detailed description of every little thing. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. I think like I agree. And I think music is like a huge thing for me and
Mhm.
has been a huge thing for me, like finding queer artists that are like real people writing about their real experiences. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel like this fictionalized thing. Although like I also love like storytelling in music, but um I feel like that has been something that's like I've been able to really connect with. So I
Mhm.
think yeah, I think everybody has like their own I don't know, like preferred like ways of like engaging with
Mhm.
art and with creativity and um so yeah, anyways, I was just
Yeah.
curious. um yeah,
Yeah,
what
it's
else?
it's just like I guess what else we could ask is there like what kind of effect has like the constant like presence of heterosexual centered media like
Mhm.
cisnormative like straight normative like media had on you growing up
Mhm.
and still today?
Mhm. Um, so I know for a long time I was never really a type of person who was interested in relationships, or like any type of like intimate connection with someone. It just wasn't something I was very interested in. But looking back on it, like with a more mature, like analytical, I can understand myself better kind of mindset, I think a lot of that was because I didn't feel like I could relate to the ways that relationships were portrayed, because especially I was seeing mostly like heteronormative relationships and relationships between men and women, and I didn't feel a connection to those types of dynamics that existed. Like I didn't feel like that could be me. And so for a long time, I identified as a lesbian because I didn't feel like I could have that type of relationship that I was told was normal with a man, like through movies, through film, through songs, right? Like this is how it has
Yeah.
to be like a normal, good relationship, I guess. So I think that really like made me feel uncomfortable by the idea of those relationships because I didn't want to feel that reduction that I think a lot of women do get in media when they become a partner to a man, right? Like I feel like so many times a woman will be her own character and then she gets with a man and then now she's the man's boyfriend, like girlfriend, you know, like it's she's not her own individual anymore. And I really felt like that was something that I had a lot of fear of in losing that autonomy. And I think that the way that heterosexual relationships were portrayed, I felt that that was what would happen. You know, like I felt that if I was in that sort of relationship, I would lose my sense of being my own person. I would kind of become subjugated under the man that I was with. Um, so yeah, I definitely think that played an impact in like how I saw my sexuality and my relationships with the people around me. I think once I started experiencing and interacting with more queer media, I definitely became more um, sure that I was queer and sure that that was an avenue through which I really felt supported and understood because I felt like, okay, now I'm actually seeing that there can be relationships that feel um, very layered and meaningful to me, and I could have that reflected in my life.
Yeah, that's really well put.
Mhm.
And to bounce off of that, yeah, like I feel like a lot of like heteronormativity isn't just like, oh, a man and a woman, that's like, yeah, that's the center focal point. It's a
Mhm.
lot of it is specifically male centered
Mhm.
because even in relationships on TV, people are only ever talking about the male characters. The in even in queer spaces, there's an emphasis on relationships between two men
Mhm.
versus relationships between female characters or like any sapphic relationships at all. And I
Mhm.
think that this heteronormativity is always kept in media as a way to like reaffirm how society views men because it's never, oh, the man and the woman, they have this interesting equal dynamic. It's so hard to find something like that. It's so
Mhm.
hard to find a straight relationship that actively appeals to me. And half the
Mhm.
time it's because I personally perceive the relationship as like, oh, they're both so bisexual. Like there's that's the only
Yeah,
explanation for
they
this.
connect through their queerness.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's very funny that like in like heteronormative relationships that are very like to the by the book, to by the norm,
Hmm.
very straight, like it's always so, oh wow, he's amazing and like he's so smart and he's so
Hmm.
successful. And then
Hmm.
at most the female character is attractive and a girl and was in the same room when he was being attractive and the best.
Yeah.
So it's very like interesting to me like how anyone can grow up wanting that because I agree. I for the longest time I was like, okay, I must be a romantic or something because I do not want to do that.
Hmm.
And like then I was like, wait a second. I was doing it all wrong. I just should have been dating a woman. But it's very interesting how like that focus on men kind of just bleeds through. That's like how so many people I know, you included, find out that they're queer specifically because they do not want such a male focused and
Hmm.
dominated life. And I
Hmm.
think that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, yeah, I think like the bottom line is the way that we like portray sex and relationships in the media and mainstream media is problematic and harmful to everybody. And it
Hmm.
like especially like I think even if you do resonate with that, like it reinforces ideas about like for like young men to like, oh, this is who I'm like how I'm supposed to treat like a female counterpart or like my partner. And then for women, this is like an expectation of how I should be treated. And
Yeah.
then it just completely excludes people who identify outside of like the gender binary or
Hmm.
Hmm.
anyone who identifies as queer. So yeah, yeah. I think like, and I think the conversations around representation in media, like we're all talking about it. We're like, oh, but we're all queer. And so like we're aware of this issue.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think it's an issue that affects like everyone too and should be important
Hmm.
across the board. But
Hmm.
uh, yeah, I
Alas.
don't, alas. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I've literally been saying alas all the time. Like the last few weeks, it's been my go-to word. I'm feeling very like archaic, but it's fine.
I
Um,
mean, I guess like a good like question to end it on, just tracing back to the beginning. Like, could you like give some more like examples of like sapphic media that you
oh yeah,
think,
what's your list?
yeah, like what's your
Okay.
list?
So I had to start with the games just because I had such a focus on butterfly soup. So obviously that's there. And then it's kind of short, but I'll say The Last of Us. I love The Last of Us, specifically Left Behind DLC because that's, and then Last of Us
Yeah.
2, like just the main first game, not so much there, but second and DLC. Then for movies, I'm not a big movie watcher, so I only had two. I had Love Lies Bleeding. Just love the vibes of that one.
Mm.
Then I had Bottoms because I thought that is such a fun, like silly, campy movie that like we're not
Yeah.
having any kind of like negative, like down, like sad storyline. It's just some people being crazy there in a high school, and I love
Yeah.
that for them. Um, for my shows, I had Yellow Jackets,
Yeah.
For animations, I had Arcane, She-Ra. That one really was so cute to me just because like it made me
Yes.
feel
Yes.
young again in heart. I also have really been loving Interview with the Vampire. So season two, there's a sapphic relationship. It's not as prevalent, but I really do like their dynamic in that. So I'd say that. And for my books, I have Last Night at the Telegraph Club. That one was really good. I think it gave a really good historical kind of perspective. It's not super old. The author wrote it recently. It's a modern book, but it takes place a bit in the past. And I think that really gave like a good view of kind of how it was, especially in an intersectional way. The characters are like Asian American and they experience a lot of like the systemic homophobia that was very prevalent at that time. So I really liked that one. Our Wives Under the Sea is a good like horror type book. I also have just anything by Sappho. I'm a big poet. I love poetry. So specifically, if not Winter, the fragments but of Sappho, that one's really good. I also like Priory of the Orange Tree. It now has a series too, but that specific book has a really good sapphic relationship in it, and that's fantasy. Love some fantasy. And I think the last one I had, though it does have its issues, I do think it is a good cornerstone Carmilla original sapphic vampire. Um, Although it does have some negative portrayals at the time, it was pretty revolutionary for what they could get away with then. So that was just my short list, but a lot of those I felt like had those like layers of characters that existed in kind of ways that weren't just super straightforward fit in this one box. I feel like a lot of them could be analyzed through a lot of different perspectives and means. So that was pretty much what I based my recommendations off of, that type of analysis. But yeah.
I mean, you had some good stuff on there,
Yeah, you did.
actually.
That's a
And
good list.
yeah,
Thank
and I
you.
think it goes to show how much the Sapphic community just we want stuff that's complex. We want stuff that
Yes.
gives us the attention we deserve, you know?
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, well, it has been wonderful having you here with us.
Yes, thank
Yes,
you
thank
so much,
you.
Beck.
Of course, I had such a great time talking to you both. I really appreciate you guys having me on here, so thanks.
Oh, of course. No, thank you.
hmm
And
And
I look forward to one day seeing your name on the bookshelf. So
Thanks.
I
I
wish you
appreciate
luck.
that. Thank you.